Back-to-school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.
Welcome to Die Hard on a Blank, the podcast where we explore the influence of Die Hard on action cinema, one action movie at a time. I'm Philip Gawthorne, and with me as always is Liam Billingham, and today's film is Mission Impossible.
It's Die Hard in a spy series reboot. Phil, would you like a piece of gum? I have this gum.
Is it red
Yes,
and red and green?
Red light, green light.
What are you trying to do?
No, I just want you to try this gum. It's delicious.
I'm good.
So I'm very
you've got
excited.
a lot of energy.
Oh,
apparently,
yeah.
About
Well,
this one.
mhm.
This movie is fantastic.
It's amazing.
It holds up so well.
Recently, we were on Chris Tapley's podcast, 50 Miles Per Hour. Thank you, Chris. And we had to make a list of the 10 best action movies of the 90s. And not only do I regret not putting this on the list, I think it should be in all 10 spaces, except for Speed. Speed can remain at number 4, but 1, 2, 3, 5 through 10 are Mission Impossible.
It's pretty as good a blockbuster as you could
Ever
ask
made.
for, right?
Ever
like,
made.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's kind of... there's so many things that are astonishing about the achievement of this film. I think, one of them is, as I recall in the UK, this was a PG as well.
Huh.
There's very little violence. There's actually, I was going to talk about this later, but as it's come up, Ethan Hunt never fires a gun.
Yeah, he doesn't.
There's no shootouts. There's none of
He
the
holds a gun and
convention-
points a
He
gun,
holds
but
a
he
gun.
never shoots a gun.
He never shoots it. There's no shootouts. It doesn't
Yeah.
rely on any of the usual tropes and cliches of a kind of spy adventure romp. And
Right.
it does something that feels like so of the genre, but at the same time an incredibly fresh approach and way to update this iconic televisual brand.
And to tell you the truth, I think probably the reason I didn't put it on that list is I don't know if it strictly meets my definition of an action movie.
Absolutely
Though
not.
The action, it's a thriller with some very strong, especially in the third act.
It's
action
interesting
elements.
because we talked about that a little bit on that episode, but how it's kind of vibe-wise feels like an action movie, but if you actually put it under the microscope, there's only 2 action sequences in the whole film, and one of them is fairly sort of
Langley?
the Langley one I would consider more of a suspense sequence.
Yeah, that's
right?
not an action
But
sequence.
at the stuff at the beginning with the mission gone wrong is not. It's not really an action sequence
Right.
per se. There's bits of action in it, and then you have a big action set piece at the end. But the rest of the film is all suspense.
Yes,
you know.
you're right. No, that's true. I did read an interesting, Jordan Fish, who follows the show and has listened before, wrote this really interesting, very short letterbox review about how this movie begins as a paranoid thriller from the 70s and ends as a 90s action movie, which I think is a very interesting read of it. And also considering that the director, Brian De Palma, began his career in the 70s.
And has worked through multiple decades,
Right.
and been pretty attuned to the zeitgeist, I think,
Yeah.
in all decades, certainly through 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Right.
Did you see this when it came out?
Opening night.
Yeah.
I saw this opening night with some friends. I didn't see it with my dad. I think this might have been the beginning of the I'm going to go to the movies with my dad. What, this is 1990.
That sort of hurt my heart a little bit.
I know, it was set 95. So I would have been 13. So yeah, I think I saw it with friends, had it on VHS, watched it 14 million times. Pretty obsessed with this movie. Had the single with the Larry Mullen,
on
Adam
cassette,
Clayton. No,
or-
a CD.
Okay.
I got it for $4. I remember, and just my dad was like, "Please stop
I had it on
playing
cassette.
this. Stop playing this over
I was a
and
little
over."
behind the times. We're a bit
That's
behind
all right.
the times in England.
That's okay. Yeah, you were catching up. You had the vinyl.
I had it on an 8-track.
Yeah. Did you see it in the theater?
I did with my dad.
Okay.
Classic.
You don't have to make me feel bad.
Classic. Sorry, classic. I mean, again, this is dad juice.
Well, the thing is, actually, the next movie we're going to cover on the show, which we'll reveal later, I did see with my dad, and many of the subsequent movies. But so I think the reality is that this was just a fluke. But I remember watching it with him, and I remember renting it on VHS, because this was when, I'm so old, when you would like rent a VHS because you couldn't buy a movie for less than $100 for like the first year of its
I have some interesting
media
trivia about that, which we'll come to later. But before we do, should we get into our fast facts?
Fast facts.
So Mission Impossible was released by Paramount in the US on May 22nd, 1996, approximately 2 months after our last film, Executive Decision, which was released on March 15th of that year. Directed, of course, by the great Brian De Palma, who we will talk about more shortly. It, of course, stars Tom Cruise. You might have heard of him. Emmanuel Biard.
Tom Cruise?
Tom Cruise. Yes.
How do you spell that?
Cruise, I want to say.
Oh, he's the guy that runs?
yeah, that's the extent of it.
Among other things.
That's the extent of it.
Right.
Tom Cruise, Emmanuel Biard, Ving Rhames, Jean Reno, Henry Czerny, Vanessa Redgrave, Kristen Scott Thomas, Emilio Estevez, and John Voight, another Shakespearean-esque cast.
You forgot
Emilio could play like a jester or something,
so good.
right? Like,
even though he's like kind of a creep to Kristen Scott Thomas in this movie, he's very, very lovable. There's some HR violations going on.
I have a theory about that.
When your job is invisible, is there an HR like? Can you file an HR complaint? You missed a cast member, but I'm gonna call you on it later.
Okay.
Because I have a trivia quiz.
Okay, all right, cool. You're gonna put me on blast.
I'm gonna put you on blast.
It was, of course, adapted from the TV show of the same name, created by Bruce Geller. The screenplay was by David Koepp and Robert Towne, based on a story by Koepp and Steven Zalian. It's a pretty all-star list of
this is the first movie that Cruise produces, and from what I understand, he brought in Towne.
So Towne was his guy.
Yeah.
Right?
Like, sure. I mean, why would he not be your guy?
Because Towne was on The Firm, as a credited writer on The Firm.
Was he on The Color of Money as well? No, probably not.
I'd have to check that, but Towne was like one of these guys that not only had his own independent career, and we talked about movies that he went on to, obviously going back to Chinatown was kind of the king of screenwriting, but then went on to have a directing career in the 80s, and we talked recently about how much I love Tequila Sunrise, which he wrote and directed. But Towne was one of those guys that also was like in the movie star business, because I believe he also did this for Warren Beatty in the 70s, right?
Yeah, Shampoo, I think he wrote.
And would be part of like a brain trust for those movie stars that were more than just actors, that would have a significant creative, not say stranglehold is like negative, but
like creative control
of a project to a large extent, right?
There's a great book called The Long Goodbye: Chinatown and the Future of Movies, I think it's called, by Sam Watson, who's a great like chronicler of Hollywood history, and he gets into Towne's writing process in that. That's sort of like Nicholson, Polanski, Towne, and Robert Evans. Like, it's sort of a portrait of all these guys at this moment. And the Towne stuff is fascinating. I mean,
the one I read about it was called Star, that was just about Warren Beatty, that was by the author of Easy Riders, Raging Bulls, I think.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I remember that book.
Interesting insight into that era and that type of movie star.
I think Towne was a bit of a ghostwriter too, right? Like, he would get paid great money to come in for like 4 days.
On this movie, that De Palma was kind of quite annoyed with Robert Towne.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
And thought that this was really David Koepp's work.
They're interesting contrasts. They're different generations, but they're both like, David Koepp is maybe the most important screenwriter of the last 20, 30 years.
With him, I believe, on Carlito's Way.
Oh, right.
Just
he was
before,
a big De Palma
another
guy.
Masterpiece.
Yeah, that movie rocks.
Incredible
that
stuff.
train scene. Jeez.
Yeah, him and trains, huh?
Oh, yeah.
So,
that's amazing.
On an estimated budget, this was a pretty staggering stat. On an estimated budget of $80 million, it grossed $457.7 million.
That's a crap load of money.
Astonishing. 5 times what's already a huge production budget.
There are podcasts that already cover this stuff, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. But you have to assume that this movie sort of really solidified. This and Jerry Maguire back to back, like, launched Tom Cruise into a stratosphere that, like, I think has continued since, right? Because he then took some risks and did some really interesting stuff in the late 90s. But, like, Mission Impossible is,
it's
almost all he does.
It's his Die Hard, if you like.
Right, I will. It's
Bruce Willis had the Die Hard franchise to rely on
Right.
that allowed him to go and take artistic risks in the interim because he
Right.
always had that bankable franchise. And Tom Cruise, I don't think, other than I think this is. I mean, yes, there was a Top Gun sequel, and some of things
Right.
have had other iterations, but really, this has been that. I mean, Cruise has had much more success going off-piste than Willis did because he's working with Stanley Kubrick on Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
He's working with Michael Mann in
Paul
Collateral.
Thomas Anderson.
Paul
God,
Thomas
can you
Anderson in
imagine if Bruce
Magnolia.
Willis had made a Michael Mann movie?
Oh my gosh!
What would that have? Wow.
Yeah, we can, but
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think they
fantasize.
had different taste, I think, yeah. I mean, Tom Cruise because he's only really had one franchise. I mean, Top Gun did really well, but it's 35 years between movies.
You can't call it a franchise.
Not really. They haven't even announced I'm sure they're making a third.
There might be one.
But, there's no Top Gun TV show. There are Top Gun video games, but it wasn't it didn't build out the way Mission Impossible has become the bread and butter.
And there's something to be in the pre-superhero era. A movie star having that durable, generation-spanning 4-quadrant franchise.
Yeah,
is like part of your sustainability. And Cruise is probably, I would struggle to think of another movie star that has been like in the top 3, top 5, even, arguably number 1 for his entire career. Pretty much. Cruise has stayed at the top since Top Gun. He's never really fallen off.
Yeah.
And Mission Impossible franchise has helped him,
Yeah.
I think, sustain that. But he's always been very, very shrewd about the directors that he's worked with. But as the names we've just listed.
Yeah. Well, even later on, like he did a Steven Spielberg run with Minority Report and War of the Worlds, both of which are excellent. And, he's kind of settled into this working relationship with Chris McQuarrie.
Mm-hmm.
And
who's
they just
become kind of inherited the Robert Town
role,
I think, to some
totally.
extent. But has also moved into the director's chair as well, which Town never did for a Cruise movie.
Right. They would hire. It was usually different folks. No, that's totally true.
Well, should we talk about our next section where we as people may know, I sometimes go into the lab, I take my microscopes and I look at the
Die Hard DNA. Little bit of a convoluted setup on that one.
I'm a convoluted guy.
We got there.
I like to torture language.
Yeah. Okay. He's a writer, ladies and gentlemen. Please hire him.
So, I was actually quite pleasantly surprised by
there was a power outage last week when you ran the numbers.
The amount of Die Hard DNA came in at 81%.
Wow.
Pretty high.
Just make that number up. Okay, cool. 80, that would be very high.
But we've got high-tech heists involving computer hacking, uncomfortable and dangerous situations in elevator shafts.
Oh, yeah.
Including characters riding elevators. Pour one out for Emilio.
Mm-hmm. He is great in his
so much fun in
10 minutes in this movie.
His hit. That he's
in.
It
was pretty shocking, I feel like, because at that moment, I think for me, Emilio Estevez was Young Guns 2,
big star in
Men
the 90s.
at Work. I kind of had I loved
Free
Emilio.
Jack.
Free Jack, classic.
The best thing he's ever done.
Well, okay.
And of course they're all friends.
Right.
I think going back to was it Outsiders?
Yes, that sounds right. I would have to. You're putting me on the spot
era,
here.
Yeah. We've got our hero sporting a white tank top for a prolonged period of the film. Particularly that stuff where he's sort of hiding out post the aquarium.
And doing the weirdest computer work you've ever seen. How does anyway, fine. Let's keep moving. Yes.
A tactical use of broken glass on the floor. Our hero army crawling through air shafts in a Langley sequence.
Yes.
A villain played by a distinguished British actor from the RSC, or actress, Vanessa Redgrave.
Who are you and what? She's so good.
Classy,
I'm
right?
in love with her.
Did you spot the Die Hard cast member?
Give me a clue. What scene?
I promise I won't hurt you.
Oh my goodness. Oh, he's in Die Hard?
So that's my impression of Tony in Die Hard doing the whole.
That guy, the long hair.
Yeah. You're a policeman. There are rules for policemen. Now, here, check this.
That's
this is
the same guy.
This is going to break your brain a little.
Okay.
So Tony is in the house. Andreas Wisniewski appears as his character is called Max's companion, and he looks decidedly like his brother Carl because he's got the flowing blonde locks.
Yes.
He's dressed all in black. You might remember from that point of view shot, I think it's in London.
Yeah.
Where it pushes in and he opens the door.
It's in Prague.
Is that in Prague still?
It's in Prague. Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I thought that might have been moved to London.
He's wearing the mask. No, it's in Prague. It's still in Prague. Blonde-haired guy.
But he's Vanessa Redgrave's like companion.
With the short hair?
No, he's got long
the
blonde
long
hair.
German-looking guy.
And they're on the train together later and stuff and everything. So that is Tony.
I spotted that. I just totally forgot.
That's Tony, Carl's brother, who meets the unfortunate fate on the stairs in for when he gets his neck broken by John McClane. So we have a direct Die Hard connection there. And I'd say the finale kind of has some Die Hard on a train vibes with all the principal characters duking it out on that high-speed HGV that travels between London and Paris. A little bit of diluted Die Hard DNA with our friend Dale Dye of Under Siege appearing as the character of Bonds.
Well, and also like a very important figure in military advising on... Didn't he run the Saving Private Ryan boot camp?
Yes, and kind of created that model as a technical advisor and was, of course, an ex-military
These
captain.
guys figure it out. They figure out how to keep it going.
He's very, has a lot of gravitas.
Yeah, no,
as an actor, he's, very strong as well.
Yeah, he is really
very
good,
natural.
actually. Well, because they cast him in the part that he knows how to play. You know, it's like he's just kind
I want to see his Hamlet. Dale Dye's Hamlet. Let's make it happen.
All right, I don't know.
And we'll be back with more hot takes like that right after this quick break.
Shop Plato's Closet tax-free August 2nd through 4th for back-to-school styles. We sell the trendy, gently used styles you need to make a difference in the world and in your wallet for back-to-school shopping. Save up to 70% off regular retail prices by choosing recycled styles. Save even more when you shop tax-free this weekend. Make a change that others can respect and repeat. Shop Plato's Closet in North Charleston and West Ashley this year for your back-to-school looks. Plato's Closet, located in West Ashley on Sam Rittenberg Boulevard and North Charleston on Rivers Avenue.
And we're back with our next section of the show, Anatomy of an Action Movie, where we explore the tenets.
We live in a Mission Impossible world.
I don't know what to do with that.
There are dead friends on a bridge.
They're dead. They're all dead.
So before we move on, I just want to quickly, that was a fantastic transition. You just, you're not wasting any time. You're kicking butt. You're just going for it.
Let's go.
You're a busy man. Don't you have a thing in Prague?
Yes.
Later today?
I can't talk about
it. Okay. I lived in Prague for 2 years.
So we were going to touch on that.
We're going to touch on it.
Because the mission of this movie starts in Prague.
And it was cool. When I lived there, I rewatched this. And I was like, oh, cool. Because most of it takes place in and around the Charles Bridge, which is the most famous, bridge in Prague. So it was like, I didn't hang out. That was like a real touristy spot. But it was cool to like the street where Cruz gets picked up by Vanessa Redgrave. I taught English and I taught English all over the city. I would go to businesses and whatever. But my office was 2 blocks from that. So when I lived there, I did a little bit of a walk around and tried to spot Mission Impossible location.
It's beautiful.
Have you ever been there?
I haven't.
Oh, it's the best. It's the best.
Yeah.
I lived there for 2 years.
Was it Czech Republic by that?
Yes, yeah. So it was Czech. Yeah, it was
Czechoslovakia.
No, because I lived there.
I can't remember when
that was late night. That was 90s.
My memory of all of that stuff of Yugoslavia when it was Yugoslavia is based around the World Cup.
People, of course, it is. People still call it Czechoslovakia, and it is not. It is the Czech Republic and the Republic of Slovakia or Slovakia. Gotcha. But it was great. It was a great place to live. When you're 22 and the beer is outrageous,
I bet, yeah.
And the living was cheap, and so to live there were a lot of Americans when I was there. But it was cool to revisit this and Triple X. Takes place in Prague as well. Prague was a real destination. When I lived there, a lot of my friends were actors who would do 2 days on Wanted and live for months or something.
You're reminding me of another connection here because I think, if I'm right in saying that Living Daylights takes place in pre-Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, which also features Andreas Wisniewski.
Right. Oh my God.
As the milkman delivering henchman.
Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, and also Amadeus, which I just rewatched because it's on Netflix right now, was all shot in Prague. That movie is incredible.
It's a great locale where this movie begins. So the premise is when a mission in Prague goes horribly wrong, IMF agent Ethan Hunt, Tom Cruise, ends up as the only survivor and is therefore wrongly assumed to be a mole that IMF director Kittrich, Henry Czenry, is looking to expose. So Hunt goes on the run and plans to steal a valuable knock list with the help of some disavowed agents in the hope of exposing the real traitor and clearing his name. Now, here's my sort of question. As a premise, it's fun. It's sort of strong, right?
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily revelatory. right? How much does the actual premise of this movie, the plot that they chose, how much does that factor in to this film's astronomical success and the franchise that it launched?
Well,
just what do you think about that as a plot?
Well, two things. One, I remember people finding this movie so confusing.
Really?
Yeah, like I remember the first time I watched it, not
that about Clear and
necessarily
Present Danger as well, and I'm like,
well, I think that's because that has
why?
a lot of characters. But I remember people being like, I didn't understand Mission Impossible at all. And I remember being like, I remember the first time I see it, not quite 100% getting that Tom Cruise worked for Henry Czenry, like when he puts the glasses on. Like I think that that wasn't quite totally clear to me, that he's like, you know, that like when he puts the glasses on, I've always read the ending of that is the whole operation is a mole hunt, and Ethan Hunt is hunting for the mole, right? So, but I remember people just being like, this movie confuses the hell out of me. And I also remember that the killing of the cast and the subsequent like reveal of Jon Voight as the villain has like really pissed people off. Like Martin Landau walked out of the premiere of the movie, as I recall. Maybe this is apocryphal, but I think it's true, because he was like, what the hell is
the
this?
original cast were very upset with the some of the choices that were made to kill off these characters, right? And Jim Phelps was a character in the original show.
The only sort of carryover character that he you know, he was Jon Voight is essentially playing the same character from the series.
But I think what this kind of brings us to, in my opinion, brings us to the next thing I wanted to raise, which is, of course, there's a number of converging forces that have contributed to this film's astronomical success. But I think that although the script is brilliant and the plot is very strong and the premise is juicy, it's De Palma. It's De Palma's directorial approach, and I think his sheer exuberance that kind of put this over the top. And I think it's really interesting because, look, everyone's favorite bloodthirsty, Hitchcockian-loving pervert is not the most obvious choice for this kind of material that's basically a PG, I wouldn't say sanitized, because I think that's like not quite right, but like very broadly appealing, kind of straight movie.
Down the middle.
But he finds...
From the very first shot.
He finds a little bit of kink in there.
You know you're in a De Palma movie, because the very first thing you see is Emilio Estevez. You don't know it's him. Like, and the camera is pushing in the voyeur, like on this room, and you're watching like Tom Cruise disguised as some kind of Russian mafia guy. Yeah. Maybe we know, it's never made clear to us, interrogating a hitman and faking that a girl that he's brought home, played by Emmanuel Biert, is like this guy thinks she's dead, and Tom Cruise needs to get information from him, and he gives him the information, and then they pull away the reveal, and they're in like a warehouse, and they've brought this guy there, and it's so many layers upon which it's working, because Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise, but he then wakes up Emmanuel Biert, who's been put under, and they are. My reading of that opening scene is that they've already been intimate in the movie. So like, and then you meet her husband, and so from like a very early moment in this movie, you're like, what? Like, it's a spy movie with a lot of shadow.
There's a lot of like, I think, if you look closely at the movie, this is why I think it's calibrated so perfectly. That there's a lot of like sexual subtext under, simmering,
right?
But it's not,
to say the least,
overt,
yes.
Right? And I kind of think, to your point earlier, what you were saying about Emilio and everything, I think it's like Caligula when these guys aren't working.
Yeah,
they're all at it.
Yeah.
Like Tom Cruise and Kristen Scott Thomas, like their sort of intimacy where they're in the
hiding in the shadow,
that classic spy trope of. By the way, if you're ever in like a foreign city, the people that are pretending to make out in an alley are probably spies.
Oh my God, that sequence is amazing.
It's brilliant.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think like. Yeah, I never thought of it before. But what is great about this is how De Palma treats this movie like there's a lot of backstory that we don't have.
Yeah, you're just dropped in.
You're just
to
dropped
this world.
in. Yeah.
They have an existing dynamic, this group. There might be something going on between Tom Cruise's character and Emmanuel Biert's 100%.
Character. I think there has to be.
At the very least, there is sexual desire and tension.
Yeah.
Potentially, there could have been past intimacy.
Well, and like De Palma, like, is a pervert, right? Like he's a dirty boy.
Yeah.
Like there's
in the best possible
there's
way.
a scene later on right after everyone gets killed where Cruz is in the safe house and she comes in and he ties her up and he puts his hands over her and like she's wearing this very, like tight black dress and like it's so suggestive like that like something's about to happen that's like he's tying her up and like they're going to go at and like it's so like as a 13-year-old boy, I don't think I like would have been able to articulate what was going on, but it's like a horny movie.
Yeah.
I also think that De Palma brings this like cynicism to this movie that goes away from the series later on to some extent. Like this movie is dark.
Yeah.
Because Tom Cruise is having an affair with Emmanuel Barrett, whose husband is his boss. He's essentially cucking his boss.
His mentor and
his
friend.
His
right?
friend. And then there's a scene later when it's revealed that Phelps has killed the whole team, and Tom Cruise doesn't bat an eyelash because he's trying to get this guy. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's kind of sociopathic behavior. Like, and so and there's this great speech that I wish I'd written down where Voight's like, I make $65,000 a year and like has to get revenge. And it's like he wants to get revenge on his boss because like the Cold War's over. None of this means anything. And like the fact that De Palma chooses to be like, let's set this contemporaneously. Let's like examine the idea of a spy with no real enemy. So he's just kind of like angry, makes no money, and like has given his whole life to this thing and is like, fuck it. Let's take them down. It's very like 1990s.
Well, we've seen
kind
it
of
that this
Under
character
Siege is like
Under
this.
Siege. We're about to do The Rock.
Right.
The disillusioned patriot.
right, exactly.
Right. The enemy within.
right.
Was one of the most common tropes of
Right.
of the 90s as opposed to the 80s.
Well, and it's also like
where it was all about looking out.
if you ever think about like there's that great, idea that like, the Cold War ends and like, oh, there's just all these nukes all over.
Right.
And that's like the thing that people think that's scary. But like if you think about the world that we live in now, like, Vladimir Putin was a KGB agent. And like there's all these guys out in the world who spent this is real.
In
You
the
know this. I mean,
shadows,
you've probably
yeah.
read about this, who spent their careers like in foreign countries as spies. It's like there's all these people in the world who did these jobs. And then it's kind of like, all right, well, the wall fell. It's over.
Yes,
and the fact that this movie integrates that into it is very
well, you know what's
exciting.
occurring to me, and we talked about this a little bit with Under Siege, is this idea of people being rendered impotent, which this is
Or
kind
obsolete.
of or obsolete. But I'm drawing a sexual connection because of the De Palma thing and the love triangle with Jim Phelps and Emmanuel Barrett and Tom Cruise,
Right.
Because I think this idea of like, because he's been sort of cuckolded,
Right.
he feels some need to act out with violence towards the people around him.
Right.
But, it's just quite, the psychology of that has always quite interested me, the idea of, like people that have these ultra-violent skills and suddenly being stripped of their
Power,
being
their
emasculated
meaning. Yeah.
to some
Well,
extent.
and he's being emasculated by this like attractive, like one of the great things
Yeah.
about Tom in this movie, like that scene when they're all sitting around the table and he's chewing gum, is he's got this swagger. He's
Yeah.
like young, dumb, and full of cum. Like he has that energy to him, right? And you're right. I think they're all like boinking when they're not working. They're all
Right.
traveling together. They're all like in their 20s or early 30s. I don't know how old Tom Cruise is in this movie, but he's not.
Seems young.
He's
doesn't
young.
He, right? It's
Yeah.
a classic Tom Cruise. I mean, let's move on let's talk about the hero of the movie, Tom Cruise, as Ethan Hunt, because this to some extent I remember if it was Roger Ebert wrote this wonderful piece about the Tom Cruise vehicle,
Yeah.
and how they were all had a kind of formula that was, he comes in, he's really cocky,
Mhm.
right? Whether he's the fighter pilot or the pool hotshot or the stock car rider or the lawyer,
Right.
which he did twice for Few Good Men and The Firm as two different lawyers, but essentially the same type of guy that comes in swinging his dick around like he does in this movie,
Right.
and is humbled. There's always a mentor figure that's like Tom Skerritt, Robert Duvall, Gene Hackman, John Voight. There's always like an older man that's like the mentor. Sometimes there's like animosity or tension between them.
Yeah.
And sometimes they become like a paternalistic figure or guide, whatever, right? But they would always be this formula of like the cocky guy that gets humbled
Right.
and has to dig deeper to find his like true capability type thing. But this film sort of it's like the tail end of that run of the young Tom Cruise's formula into the more mature actor that I think he became. But my question is, like, what makes this character that's endured now for 7.5 movies, whatever we're at now, right? What makes him distinct
crazy.
and different from the other action heroes like John McClane or like James Bond in this space, the espionage space? What makes him different, and why has this character endured and remained so popular for so many films?
Well, I don't want to just like throw it back at you, but I think it's Tom Cruise. Like, you know, you have like focusing specifically on, well, very quickly, James Bond. Like, James Bond is a collection of different actors. There's that like fun theory that James Bond is a code name for a, you know, which is like a fun way to think about the series, but like kind of pointless. Like, it's not really what's going on. I don't think that, no one's intending that. But I think to throw him into contrast with Bruce Willis, right, is that like there is a period of time where Tom Cruise is kind of just like a handsome Hollywood movie star. And he's always been so famous and so ridiculously famous that you're like, you're not going to see Tom Cruise walking down the street, right? Bruce Willis, one of the most appealing things about Bruce Willis is like, that guy could be my uncle. That guy could be a cop down the street. That guy could be like changing the oil in my car.
He was a barman, and he had a different
middle class
life,
guy. Not
right?
that Tom Cruise was born in like, but like he's always he's been famous almost from the minute he became a movie star.
He started super young.
Yeah,
right. He's been a kind of a star his whole life since
and
like
whenever
81 in Taps.
And I think whenever you're watching a movie with Tom Cruise, you're thinking about, whether subconsciously or not, your history with Tom Cruise, right? And like, especially the later Tom Cruise movies are all about Tom Cruise is going to save the day. You know, well, that's what Maverick, I mean, the sort of metatextual reading of Maverick is Tom Cruise saved movies, right? Yeah. And with this one, it's kind of like, what it interests me so much about it is that like, this is kind of the beginning, unless I'm forgetting something, of Tom Cruise action star. And, you know, it's obviously going to evolve away from the character changes a lot. You know, I would say from basically the second movie on, when he pledges to save, who's the actress? Tandy Newton. He's like, I'm going to find you. Like, that's the moment that character becomes a savior of everyone. Whereas I feel like in this movie, he's just trying to like save himself,
right,
and save his own skin. And like,
I think you're right, because I don't think there's anything you would struggle to say. So tell me about the character of Ethan Hunt. There's kind of not that much there on paper.
Yeah.
Right? And it changes throughout the series.
Yeah.
Right? But it is just Cruise the star. His magnetism, his dynamism,
his physicality,
his charisma, you know, his intensity,
yeah,
you know, how he's so brilliant at being both the aggressor and vulnerable. You know, it really is him. I don't think there's anything you could say like, could there be 50 Ethan Hunt novels? Maybe, but it would feel kind of generic.
It's like how he did those 2 Lee Child movies,
right?
Where you're like, oh, that's Tom Cruise.
It's like,
what's Reacher, right? And then they recently redid Reacher with this like gigantor of a human being who's closer to the comic book characters.
Yeah.
The novel character. There's one scene in this movie. So my favorite Tom Cruise performances are always when he plays the shit heel, or like starts that way, like him in the first 30 minutes of Jerry Maguire when he's like the smooth operator, or a movie that
another classic example of the Tom Cruise vehicle formula,
and he's so good in that movie, or Live, Die, Repeat. He's such Edge of Tomorrow, right? He's such a slime ball in that movie, and like that's the Tom Cruise that I'm most interested in. And this doesn't have that. My 2 favorite Tom Cruise moments in this are the scene when they're getting the briefing and he's kind of ribbing Jon Voight, and then the scene with Jean Reno where he's got the disc and he's doing the sleight of hand magic, and he's like, "You were thinking, did I?" And like, I want more of that from this character, because he's kind of but he's working on multiple levels, because Krieger actually has the disc. and he tricks him
He
into
has to
throwing it in the
bamboozle
trash.
him, yeah.
Renault is so good in this. But yeah, I'm really interested in him when he's not the nice guy. And I think, and I also like how they don't do enough of this in the later movies, but like Ethan Hunt's a fuck up. Like he's always like fixing mistakes that he's made, as opposed to like, you know, this is the most grounded Mission Impossible movie.
And there's no scenes of it's not like he's in the casino being suave.
Yeah.
Right? Like he's not suave per se.
Well, the spy work in this movie, there isn't really spy work there is in the first one, there is in the second one, you know, with Dimitri, and then when he goes to like there's more Bond in the earlier ones, and then it very much moves away into the bigger spectacle in the later
he's
movies.
more the like tip of the spear of that team.
Yes.
Right? Like they all have a different tactical role. Like Emmanuel Biar,
he's
like
the point man.
He's the point man. They call it literally, right? So he's kind of
running point,
the dagger.
So he's the spy.
You know,
the
action. You know,
right.
It's
actually
guy.
interesting when they're describing it because Sarah's infiltrate. Tristan Scott Thomas is on the floor.
Yeah.
Claire is just perched watching what's happening. Emilio Estevez is tech, so to speak, you know.
The hacker.
Yeah.
The Theo of the squad.
And then it's like, and Tom and Ethan, you're the point man. So he's dressed as the senator, the fake Democratic senator.
That's so fun, isn't it?
He's very good at it.
Isn't it really fun? We were living in a democracy last time I checked.
Yeah,
it's like
really
it's
good.
really
He's on
fun.
the McLaughlin group. It's so funny.
It feels like he's a little bit Lyndon Johnson-esque, actually, even though the accent's a bit more maybe Virginia or something like that. But
I think that this movie has flourishes like that. That, you know, I
love that stuff.
I'm a big fan of Fallout. I think it's the sixth movie in the franchise, and that. You know, for a while I was like, that might be the best one, and then rewatching this one, I was like, no, this is the best one.
It's a gold standard.
It's amazing.
It's exceptional.
But part of what's amazing about it is that like it's really a team movie.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of an ensemble.
Yeah.
You know, piece with obviously Cruz as the figurehead.
Yeah, but he feels, especially in the early goings, part of the team as opposed to the.
He's not even in it for a little bit.
Yeah,
it feels like you don't see his normal face because of the way that opening shot. It starts on Emilio. And it's just another example of the suspense because I was watching it again this morning. We'll move on in a second. But when it literally begins with Emilio being like, come on, this is taking too long. You're immediately like tense.
Yeah.
Like, and it's De Palma's mastery of suspense and tension
and
combined
that score
with Cruz's just 1,000-watt star magnetism
kind of quality.
You know, it's just a home run.
And Emilio, like when Cruz slaps the guy and Emilio kind of goes like, oh, like, you know, like it's like the perfect package of, you know, De Palma is he gets credit for being a technical wizard and like a little bit of a Hitchcock, you know, acolyte. Ripoff would be the I think unfair term because I think he's doing something very, very different.
Yes.
But he's also great with actors, and he gets really good performances from people, and
such as
John
Voight as Jim Phelps, the villain of the piece, moving into our villain.
You are just killing
section.
it with these transitions. Why did you write spoiler alert in the notes here?
Well, just because it's we've already spoiled it, but this is a movie from 1996, so hopefully you're on top of it.
If you're listening to this without having seen the movie,
it takes a while before the reveal that John Voight is the ultimate villain.
Very sophisticated, the reveal in this movie, because they're sitting in a cafe in London.
Oh yeah,
and
brilliant editing.
And Voight is like, Kittrich killed them.
Right.
But then as he's describing it, it shows Voight doing all these things, and Tom Cruise says, "Why'd you do it?" And like he never says, "I'm the bad guy."
Right.
But the and that's why I think people were confused. I think that was this movie was pretty sophisticated for like a mainstream audience, maybe at this point, in terms of like, they never explicitly say he's the bad guy. He says it in his backstory, that great sort of like, I've been rendered obsolete speech, but it's very sophisticated. And to his credit, Voight is very justified in his own
classic, no one is a villain unto themselves type idea.
I'm the villain of this podcast, but I'm totally justified.
It's interesting casting choice of John Voight, and it really works.
Yeah.
But it's kind of not maybe the most obvious choice, and he's kind of a little bit of an action hero himself towards the end, where he's on the train and he's crawling around. He's not a young guy, you know.
No, and he's That train sequence is amazing.
with his goggles on and everything,
Yeah.
like
when he shoots his wife, like he really falls apart at the end. He really it becomes personal as opposed to
he's
just
quite
I'm gonna make some money.
subdued, isn't he? He doesn't go for any histrionics. He doesn't do a big speech where he's like, I did everything for this country and they betrayed.
Yeah.
He's pretty it was sort of neutral about it.
Yeah. Well, he
just
just wants money and he wants to get it.
Yeah, he's very good in it. The other significant villain, which I think is just worth noting because we haven't had too many of these, Vanessa Redgrave as Max. Most of the female villains we've seen in these action movies have tended to be like the hot henchwoman.
Yeah.
Like Famke Janssen in GoldenEye. Just need a second. Get my heart rate sorted out. I'll just take my shoe off and slap myself on the head.
I'm thinking of Roger Rabbit when he sees Jessica Rabbit.
I just drifted off for a second.
Yeah, so I'm back.
Characters like that. There's a character like that in Drop Zone.
Yeah.
There's who's on the bad guys.
Well,
team.
and also this movie eventually, in Fallout, Vanessa Kirby is Max's daughter.
Oh right.
So she comes back. That's and there's a
long shadow.
There's a great reveal when there's a line and she says like my late mother, and
oh cool.
You're like,
name
wow.
Gruber mean anything to you?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think that it's funny. There's the Tom Cruise, the best chemistry. Tom Cruise has the best chemistry of his entire career with the two people in this movie, in my opinion, Emmanuel Béart and Vanessa Redgrave.
Yeah.
Like when they're flirting, it's like, are they gonna get it on? Like it's very
De Palma
funny.
can't help make everything
Such a
kind
horny
of sexual,
boy. Yeah, it's great.
But it adds this cool frisson to everything, but it just simmers under the surface so that it doesn't become one of his kink fests, and it can still be a PG
this is like
movie.
a movie that you could go see with your family.
Exactly,
and
you're not even aware of it.
If
you're a certain young enough, right?
Yeah, I mean, I probably or you're clued in. You can be smart enough to be like, okay, there's subtextual stuff going on with these characters here. That aspect of it. Vanessa Redgrave is fantastic in this movie.
Real class.
It's also an early example, I feel like, of Marvel would do this later. Let's get a heavy hitter to be in this movie for 20 minutes. William Hurt as the president in Captain America: Winter Soldier, or
Redford.
Yeah, William Hurt is. William Hurt's
in Hulk.
Is in Hulk, but no, then he's later. Oh, you're right. It's Redford in Captain America: Winter Soldier, and then William Hurt shows up a couple more times throughout the.
But yes, totally.
Yeah, it's the same kind of let's get someone amazing.
Yeah.
To do this. I mean, you can't really say it's the same thing as getting Rickman for Die Hard because he never made a movie before, but Rickman coming back and doing Snape in the Harry Potter movies feels, though that ends up being it.
Yeah, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, gives it a kind of...
It's Die Hard and Nottingham Forest.
Yeah, Sherwood
Michael
Forest.
Kamen score. I want to... Sherwood Forest.
Well, maybe we'll have something about that down the ways. Hit us up on x.com. The lady of this piece...
How is your Cybertruck? I know you had to bring it in for...
There's got a couple of issues, but I'm sure it's all going to...
I'll save it for the end of the show.
So the lady of this piece, Emmanuel Béart as Claire, really interesting, as a kind of complicated femme fatale.
Yes.
Right? And this
it
is
has
that
film noir aspect to it. Yeah. But it is a noir in a lot of ways.
It's sort of...
Spy noir.
Yes, it kind of crosses onto it a little bit, right? Because she is the seductress that draws him into this web of intrigue.
And then is killed for it.
Yeah, and is the forbidden fruit to some extent as well, symbolically, in the fact that she is his boss and friend and mentor's wife.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's pretty spectacular as an actor. I mean, she's an incredibly beautiful woman.
Yeah. That accent's very powerful. Yeah. Okay, take it easy there, Tagger. You've inspired me to be. While you were talking about that, it's not that I wasn't listening because I was, but I was thinking a little bit about how this movie ends, and Tom Cruise lost his whole team. He's been disavowed, but not really because he's been working with Kittrich. He comes back in. His mentor dies after killing. After his mentor kills his wife, who's also his lover. And then at the end of the movie, he's just sitting in a cafe or a bar in the UK listening to the Cranberries. And he and Luther are now best buds. And there's something interesting and this would have broken any other person. And at the end of the movie, he's like, I'm going to go see my mom and dad. It's very straight because really it's bleak. this movie, like a lot of really bleak shit. I know this is like a summer entertainment, but you can't ignore that De Palma, like one of the great cynics, Blowout, one of the
most cynical ending of all
movie,
time.
like one of the greatest movies.
Snake Eyes is pretty cynical as well.
Someone said to me yesterday, like, I want the happy ending at the end of Blowout, and I was like, you've come to the wrong fucking movie. So like the fact that we have
darkest ending ever.
Oh yeah, and we have this relationship with De Palma, you know, who's now crossed into this is not his first Hollywood movie, right? You know, he's made Untouchables before this, but there's a lot of commentary, and this guy, you know, started in experimental theater in New York in the 70s. So the fact that he ends this kind of like, any other person would be destroyed by it. I'm just so fascinated. Like the movie ends with him being like re-embraced. He's now Jim Phelps is where we think we're going to go.
He could have made the Blowout version of this, right? Like he could. There is a version of it that isn't the summer entertainment version. That is the downbeat 70s cynical espionage movie. But I do think I'm glad you brought up the Untouchables, because I did just want to touch on that, because
you wanted to touch on the Untouchables.
Yeah, indeed.
Bill, you can't. You literally can't.
That's the thing that makes sense as to why he got this job to do this movie, because that was also for Paramount, taking another beloved TV
show,
property from another
good movie
era, incredible movie.
Yeah.
Take another incredible
I've always
writer
thought
on
of
that
this
movie.
podcast as a baseball team.
What, are you going to hit me with a baseball bat? What's happening?
I don't know. It's
baseball.
It's just fun to quote.
So I think it does make sense from that standpoint that's why Paramount were like, look, he kind of rebooted the Untouchables,
right? Yeah,
and he was able to take a property that was pretty kind of dated, right? The Untouchables, 50s TV, little dry, set in a very dry era, and make it feel incredibly
literally dry because of Prohibition.
Right. See, I've got the puns
Look
coming
at you.
all over.
Look at amazing
seeping out of me.
Wow.
So I think
it
makes sense that he was the one to adapt this, but it's just interesting when you know what's in De Palma's dark heart and you know what his kind of fetishes are.
Let me ask you a question, because you gave me a look earlier that made me think that you don't agree with me, which is fine.
That's just my resting bitch
Cruise
face.
is working for Henry Czenry the entire movie.
Is that right?
That's how I've always read. Now I've never like sat down and been like,
I'd have to really think about that.
When he puts on the glass, so Czenry gets off the helicopter to go get on the train, and he gets 2 tickets and a watch. Oh, maybe it's not.
I read it that change. He is drawing Kittrich in.
Okay.
They're not. Kittrich isn't a bad guy. He's a cold-hearted bastard.
He's a bureaucrat.
Going about what he's trying to get, what he's done, like, and squeezing people personally with like threatening his family and stuff. But his sort of macro objective is altruistic in the sense he's trying to find this mole who is going to expose all of these agents.
Right.
He has to be ruthless to do that. Right.
And Czenry is amazing in this movie.
Oh, he's not
in the movie enough, but he's
We're going to get to him and some of the other incredible supporting actors shortly. But my reading of it was that Cruise knows that Czenry isn't a bad guy, but he knows that Czenry is going to destroy him unless he can figure this out and then bring him back on side.
So that makes much more sense.
To reveal the true traitor, which is actually John Voight.
So I've been reading too much into this movie for a long time. I always read it as that Cruise has been involved in the mole hunt from the beginning. But that makes way more sense. But
I could be wrong.
No, I don't think you're wrong. I think you're absolutely right. But, in rewatching it this week, I was like, oh, he sends him the ticket and the watch, and he doesn't know who it comes from. But I've always read it as like they have a...
Well, he's ultimately not... Like, him and Czenry need to get on the same page.
Right,
He just knows that, because they're actually... So in that sense, they are working together, just not consciously.
Just not consciously, right. No, that makes much more sense. I always read it differently, but no, that makes Also, to come back to the reason I bring that up in the context of this is on some level this is just like a spy romp, and I think what I've been trying to get at is like on another level it's like a very dark movie about human nature and the fallout of like feeling completely unmoored from your whole life's work because of international politics.
What you're saying here really reminds me of like our conversation about Verhoeven. And how Verhoeven is so skilled at, like, he knows how to still keep it fun.
Yeah.
Like RoboCop and Total Recall, if you really analyze their politics and
Or
their points
Starship
of view,
Troopers.
or Starship Troopers, exactly, are like very cynical, intellectual, cerebral, and dark. Subversive. But he never lets that subsume the entertainment experience of the movie to keep it fun. That's where they went wrong with RoboCop 2, even though RoboCop 2 has its merits. It's way too dark and nihilistic, and it stops being fun.
Frank Miller, right?
It's Frank Miller's script, and it's Erwin Kershner directed.
Right.
So,
I like Erwin Kershner. He's a good director.
He's great. He's made a pretty good sequel. Anyway, let's move on to the
Return of the Jedi.
Briefly about the move on to the
Attack of the
where my
Clones.
Richard Marquand heads at.
You know who worked on that movie? David Fincher.
On
Return of the
which movie?
Jedi.
Is that right?
He was a storyboard. He made storyboards or something.
Interesting.
Yeah, more models or miniatures. Okay, yeah, moving on.
Briefly
Just
about
Phil,
the
you're
action.
just-
We're trying to cook through this.
Let's cook.
The action of this movie, there's, as we sort of touched on this, we don't need to go into too much detail. Because there's actually not that much out and out action in the movie. It's divided into. I love this as a structural.
Yeah, you do. This is Philly special.
Structural freak. It's 3 acts with 3 set pieces,
And each act has a great set piece.
the
Yeah.
Prague mission, the CIA heist, and the incredible finale on the TGV.
Yeah.
So it's divided into these 3 quite clean chapters.
You know what else is interesting about that TGV chase is that, like, it's kind of like, wow, like as an American, right? Maybe this is American naivete, but like you can just go from Paris to London on a train.
Yeah, and like an idiot, I never did it when I lived in London for 10 years.
Yeah,
I didn't explore as much of Europe as I wish I had.
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Prague and I traveled
did a
around.
bit, but
I remember
not as much as I
taking
would've
trains
liked.
from Prague to Berlin and just being like, this fucking rules. This is
Yeah,
so cool that you
I
can just
regret
get on
it,
a train.
but,
Well, you can always go back.
I hope so.
Maybe a couple months
Tune
from now.
into my other podcast.
Anyway.
It's called Phil's Regrets. So let's move on.
Martini
it's pretty
required.
long.
Yeah.
It's a 200 episode deep dive into my disturbed psyche.
Yeah.
Let's move on.
You're just talking about therapy.
Let's move on to
Not much humor. Couple
not much
good
humor,
jokes
not
in
worth
this.
talking, not worth
Are there
talking
any
about.
really-
But we have a few zingers in our next section.
Yeah, let's in our next section, the Die Hard Oscars. Let's put on our old racist senator.
We were living in a democracy last time I checked.
That is I don't want to get into this.
I'm
I'm going to
white
stop.
tux
But this is
for
like a
this.
fascinating Clinton era. Like this is a politician, an old decrepit white guy. Thank God they're all gone.
But he says he's a Democrat, which was interesting.
Yeah,
it says
yeah.
D. It
Yeah,
says
yeah,
D
yeah,
as a
yeah,
sec-
I noticed
But just to touch on that for a second, does this posit the idea that this guy is actually Tom Cruise in disguise is a sitting U.S. senator?
No, the guy is fishing that week.
But it says he's listed on the news as a senator, Democrat, for such and such a plate, like Virginia or wherever it is.
But it's not. Tom Cruise is disguised as him.
I know that, but I'm trying to say how can he?
I know you
He's
know
an
that.
elected official.
Yeah.
So has Tom Cruise been impersonating him, got elected so that he has this disguise?
Oh, I've heard this theory before.
Or what's
I
the
don't
deal there?
No, I mean very clearly. Like I think the even better question is like he's fly fishing in County Kildare during this whole thing,
Right.
Right. I feel like it would be hard to fake that. Because like
Me too.
senators have schedules and plans and things like that. Like I mean, who cares? It doesn't really matter.
It's
'cause
fun regardless,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm just poking at it because I'm just curious. I thought it might have made more
That
sense
is-
if he was like an aspirant congressman or something
Well,
that isn't necessarily actually in office, but is like a high profile political figure for that time. But who
Yeah.
knows? It's
funny.
But
There-
maybe the fun of it is the idea that IMF are so sophisticated that they can have Tom Cruise in disguise as actual elected
well, it's funny.
US
Like
senator.
it's funny. Like deep state conspiracy.
Yeah,
Right? Which is kind of fun.
It's fun.
You know? Yeah,
it's
totally.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
But let's move on to our first category of the Die Hard Oscars, which is the John McClane Yippee-Ki-Yay Award for Best Line.
Ooh, let's hear. I'm curious what you got.
I think I've got 4 here. So
All right,
my
let me-
first one is, of course, the classic, the GOAT. I understand you're very upset. Kittrich, you've never seen me very upset.
Classic. Those canted angles
I mean,
on
the
their
way-
faces.
Another example of De Palma's like mastery of suspense in
Yeah.
that sequence.
It's just two people talking
You know,
to each other.
and it's cinematic
And
as
it's
hell.
amazing. Yeah, incredible.
This was the moment in the movie, by the way, just this line. When they said this line and the music kicks in, it's like this movie is going to make $1 gazillion.
Yeah.
It's when he says, You really think we can do this? We're going to do this.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Shot of the fire engine, and you're like, this movie plays like gangbusters.
Hey, Phil.
It's going to make all the money in the world.
Phil. Beady boo. Sorry.
I was really hoping this wasn't going to...
Sorry.
Your mouth trumpet. It comes up in all the Bond films, and I'm like, I just sort of sit here like patiently waiting for it to end.
Thank you. You can give me Venmo me for any requests.
Yes.
What's next?
Good morning, Mr. Phelps.
Yeah.
I love that line because that's actually when Kittrich says it later on. He looks at the watch and realizes that it's confirming that John Voight's still alive. Because actually, at the beginning, when he's playing the self-destruct tape, it begins with him saying, "Good morning, Mr. Phelps."
Right.
So it's actually a callback.
Kittrich's voice, Henry Czerny's voice, is perfect for this.
He's amazing in this.
He's really good.
And then this one is kind of dark.
Okay, give it to me.
But this is the one I remember being a really good line, a Serbic line. My lawyers are going to have a field day with this, which is what Max says. And then Kittrich. Go on.
I think we'll leave the lawyer.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll just leave the courts out of this one.
That is a chilling
line. In the moment, it's fun because you're like, she needs to go down, but actually,
he's
kind of terrifying.
I'm going to extrajudicially fuck you up, is essentially what he's saying.
It's really dark. Yeah. To your point about the cynicism, the underlying cynical nature of the movie.
Shadow,
even though this is total
very
popcorn
Hitchcock,
entertainment.
by the way. Very Hitchcock. Like Shadow of a Doubt. One of the great.
This movie is like layer upon
baller.
layer upon
fucking
layer.
Baller.
It's just... it's not even like a bullseye. It shatters the bullseye and goes through for another 100 yards, you know?
I want to give it... those are all great. Red light, green light. Very important line. But I also would like to give it to... Wake up, Claire! Jim's dead! They're all dead! I love that line. Sorry if I was
But it just goes to like his... That's a perfunctory line, but in the hands of Tom Cruise, it becomes like...
Yeah, well, it's very memorable. You know,
so
or the moment, this is very small, but when Kittrich goes, I'll meet you at this spot in 1 hour. Tom Cruise goes, you're in Prague?
1 hour, hangs up. This movie's amazing, guys. Watch it again. It is stunning.
If you're dealing with a man who shot... What is it? What does he say?
Stabbed.
And murdered his whole team. How upset do you think you're going to make him if you drag Uncle Donald out to the courthouse and he hangs up? It's amazing. And he's looking at the timer.
Oh,
yeah.
Incredible.
He wanted us to know he was
Liverpool
in
Street,
London.
my old stomping ground.
Oh, yeah.
So I
love
think,
London.
Me too, I miss it.
Phil's Regrets
Kittrich,
coming to you on
Phil's
a different
Regrets,
RSS.
episode 17.
Number episode 17, London.
And then systematically every city that I haven't gone to.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
So I think it's Kittrich, You've Never Seen Me Very Upset.
Yeah, that's
is the
winner.
best line.
Yeah, you're right.
For a combination of the written word and Cruise's delivery and De Palma's direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's
That'd
an
be my
amazing moment.
choice.
Yeah, I'm going to go with that.
All right, let's move on to our next session to talk about a couple of incredible actors that we haven't had a chance to touch on. The Hans Gruber Exceptional Thief Award for stealing the film. 3 nominees, one of whom we have talked about, the wonderful Emmanuel Biart as Claire. And then two guys that we haven't had a chance to talk about, but we need to. Ving Rhames as Luther and Jean Reno as Krieger.
Mr. Hunt. Jean Reno's great. I mean, they're both great in this movie. Ving Rhames, kind of like a big old teddy bear.
Yeah,
he's quite hug him.
He's quite soft in this film, isn't he?
Especially compared with
he's
some
got
of his
a softer
other
side
parts.
to him.
Well, and he's about to play Diamond Dog in Con Air, which
he is not soft.
Yeah, but he's
decidedly
amazing in that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what a run he was having in this time.
Well, and also he'd done Don King a little bit before this for HBO, right? And
Pulp Fiction, of course, being his kind of real breakout. And
what is the? Oh man, it's so good.
We touched on this the other day. He's amazing in the movie Dark Blue with Kurt Russell.
I've never seen that.
It's so good.
Yeah, was the Blu-ray on the shelf? Should I take a look?
I actually only got an English DVD of that one.
Oh, but it
won't work. Don't worry about it.
My player's region free. I actually spent a little.
It won't work.
Yeah, no, it will. Yeah, it will.
It definitely won't work.
There's a button I push that lets me change regions. The region free player.
No, it won't work on that.
It will.
I'll make sure it doesn't.
I have a great idea. Why don't you lend it to me and I'll try it and I'll let you know if it works.
Yeah, I think I lent it to someone else or I misplaced
threw it away.
Never mind.
You have a problem.
This is a tough pick though, isn't it?
It's Jean Reno.
Yeah.
No, because Jean Reno is going to come up on a later great movie where he plays basically the same part that he's absolutely amazing in. So I'm going to save him for later, and I'm actually going to give it to Henry Czenry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Is he going to come up in another category?
He might.
Okay. But I think Henry Czenry steals every second of this movie.
What? I think you're right.
What about Dunlow? William Dunlow?
Yeah, go give us a
give
us a tight 45 on Dunlow. That's podcast language,
Episode 18,
right?
Dunlow. So talk about the cynicism of this movie. Like, I think the thing that's very enjoyable about this movie is like William Dunlow is the ultimate bureaucrat. He goes, he sits at a desk, he files some paperwork. I feel like he doesn't.
This is the actor or the.
That's the name of the character. I forget the actor's name, but then one day someone decides to break in. They make him sick. He throws up. Maybe he has diarrhea as well. I've always thought of he's kind of like completely screwed, and by the end of the day, he's manning a radar tower in Alaska. And I just think it's like such a funny kind of like 90s like fuck you up kind of thing. And again, that's just like really they never had to return to Dunlow. He doesn't have to matter. But the movie is like so obsessed with his little patterns and how he walks around. Part of it is to build the stakes of the heist, right? But like, you know, he like kind of goes and sits and reads this. He takes his little 9 a.m. break, you know, and then he goes back and he gets really sick. And then like at 11 a.m., it's like your life's over.
Yeah.
And I've always just found that scene between Dale Dye. Is it Dale Dye?
Dale Dye,
where
yeah.
he's like,
I think that's what Henry Czenry says he wants to have happen. Like, I want him manning a radar tower in Alaska by the end of the day.
And it's just so bleak. And that guy is you know, he basically says his name and oh God. And actually, he does a pretty good job. He very, very ascertains first of all, it's not his fault that he's literally been poisoned. And then he very quickly is like, wait a minute, what happened here? And he knows he's got it figured out before they even get out of Langley. So actually, that guy's pretty competent, but it's like the powers that be are like he's got
someone needs to. There's a scapegoat, right?
Right.
Someone needs to be.
Well, and it's also just interesting.
Heads have to roll for this.
Think about these movies as like again, we've said this a million times. After the Cold War, the villain is not the foreign power; it's the government. It's the apparatus that's being built to screw over regular people.
The unfeeling.
Not that I subscribe to this in reality, but that's what a lot of these movies do. The bad guy is now within.
Right.
The bad guy is within.
Enemy within. That was the trend
or
of the
enemy
90s.
of the state. Right, does that as well.
Right.
And a lot of these, you know, kind of later movies.
Well, the Dick Thornburg Award for Dick of the Movie, I have 3 nominees, one of whom you just mentioned.
Sorry.
But that's okay. I think you're right. I mean, they're all
because he's not.
wonderful.
You said it earlier. He's not really the dick.
No,
he has dickish tendencies. Barnes, Ben were trained to be ghosts.
Yeah, it's funny how he can do a performance that's quite big.
Yeah,
but feels tonally in sync with the movie that he's in.
Yeah.
And
what are you going to do, Barnes?
So fun.
Put a guy at the airport. He's so good.
His delivery is just like, wow, this guy is strutting.
Well, a couple of years ago, maybe a decade ago now, because life is moving faster and faster every day. My wife turned on the show Revenge, and I was like,
Madeline Stowe?
I'm not that into this. And then Henry Czenry showed up, and I'm like, I am all in for this show. Let's go.
Czenry cast? Telling you. It's episode 19 of Phil's Regrets. The fact that it hasn't happened yet.
All right, well, we haven't recorded that episode yet, so chill.
It's going to be a special guest.
Yeah.
John
Henry
Voight
Czenry, ladies and gentlemen.
John Voight as Jim Phelps,
yeah.
But here's my joker in the pack here for Dick of the Movie.
Tom Cruise, Ethan Hunt.
The rat in the air duct.
Oh, that rat sucks. That's a good pick. Jean Reno's kind of the dick of the movie, in my opinion, because he's just a piece of shit.
Yeah, he's awful.
He's betrays them. I think from the beginning he knows he's going to betray them. I think.
Well, he kills Kristen Scott Thomas.
Right, he does. I forgot about that.
It gets revealed later. So
Kristen Scott Thomas is great in this movie, and
not
I love.
It long, but
is
very
this
good.
Before English Patient or after?
It's the same year,
but
I don't know when.
But it's just cool that this amazing British actress. Have you watched any of Slow Horses? The show.
No, I hear great things
Yeah, it's
about
great.
it.
It's really good. It's some serious spy shit. But Gary Oldman and her just both getting like $1 an episode to do their thing is pretty exciting.
All right, so we're giving it to the rat.
Let's give it to the rat.
Yeah.
Does the rat represent the rat at the core?
The rat within.
It's like the rat in The Departed. The steakhouse rat.
Right. Yeah, the last shot.
Yeah, very subtle.
What was the symbolism behind that?
I don't get it. The Departed rocks, though.
Of course,
The Departed rocks.
It's incredible.
That's a line in that movie that sums up being from Boston, which is, I'm Irish. I can let something be wrong for my entire life.
What's that thing he says? What does Freud say about the Irish or something?
Oh,
about
yeah.
that?
That's so good. Anyway.
Let's move on to our next category, the best death.
No more table. I don't know. I can't do it. I had that.
Commit.
Okay. Sorry.
Commit to the moment.
What? Dad, calm down. No more table. Next time you have a chance to kill someone, don't hesitate. Was that?
That was pretty good.
That was pretty good. A little low-key Henry Czenry. Okay.
Henry Czenry as Marco.
Henry Czenry cast. Moving on. All right, best deaths.
IMF agent Hannah, who we haven't given a shout out
she
to.
blows up.
Getting blown up during the Prague op.
Boy, the 90s were just filled with good British actress. They're just hanging out doing little roles in cool Hollywood movies.
Speaking of another one, Kristen Scott Thomas being brutally stabbed by what turns out to be John Reno through
Why
that,
does she
through
get
that
so
gate.
close to that gate? She's trying to save Galitzin?
I can't remember.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
And then the double whammy of John Voight and Jean Reno being blown up in the helicopter in the Channel
Red
Tunnel.
light, green light. The way that Voight hits the bottom
Red
of
light, green light.
When they both start to climb up the sides of the helicopter and the theme music kicks in, amazing stuff.
Movies, man.
Movies, man. Yeah, that's Philly special.
That sequence is fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. It's like perfect. It's
they save the strongest, obviously it goes that saying to some extent, but not every movie does this. I mean, I think the A-Team, for example, a movie I really like, its best sequences in the middle of the film.
That's tough.
And it's a tough thing to pull off. And that film wasn't considered, it did okay, wasn't really considered like a hit, didn't get a sequel. This film it's important to save the best for last.
Yeah.
With an action movie.
Yeah, it's like Oppenheimer has that middle section where they're building the bomb, and it's like hard. That movie rules, but it's hard to recover from the middle act of that movie.
And it's a different type of film, obviously, but it leaves you buzzing as you leave the theater.
Right.
And then you tell everybody how great the movie is, and they all come and tell.
Well, and everyone's talking about the helicopter thing because nobody's seen anything like that before. It's amazing.
So that would be my pick.
Good. Yes. I think I agree with you. I think that's really good. I also think Jack getting elevator shafted.
What was going on there? What was the things that went into his face?
I wonder if it was supposed to be like an emergency stop or something like that.
It might have been something they just made up.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Well,
let's take a quick break.
Let's take a quick break.
Let's go take a break. I'm going to go get a piece of gum.
Back with our.
Want some gum?
I think I'm okay.
No, it's really good. It's juicy fruit flavored.
Okay. And we're back with our final section of the show, the Double Jeopardy trivia quiz, where the scores can really change. Does everyone get this reference?
Is that to a movie? I'm just kidding.
Do people? Is it too obscure?
No, it's from
sorry.
Die Hard.
I want it to say.
No, I think
I want
everybody
that
knows.
sound. Sorry,
I think
Hans,
everybody
wrong
knows.
guess.
Yeah, we don't do sound effects in the show, so you have to do it with your voice. Sorry.
Just use
We
your
don't have the budget.
imagination, guys.
This episode of the show already cost $1 million an episode to produce.
Question number 1.
Ooh, I'm not collaborating with anyone.
You're not collaborating.
My team is dead.
And they're all dead. Question number 1.
On their way here, they were all killed in increasingly outlandish ways.
Okay. Question number 1.
Yes.
Mission Impossible was the last motion picture from a major studio to be released for home entertainment in what format?
The last? Laserdisc.
Incorrect. Think about it.
It's not VHS. Is it VHS?
It's close to VHS.
Betamax?
Betamax.
Wow. Yeah, of course it wasn't. Yeah, I'm a little embarrassed.
How funny is that?
That's fun. Betamax ruled.
I have never interacted with a Betamax. I had one.
Well, they don't talk to you. They just kind of sit there.
Yes,
my friend Brian Fahey, who's been mentioned on the show before. Shout out, Brian. Hi, I miss you. Love you. He had a beta player, and we used to go to there was one video store in my hometown that rented Betamax, and we'd go. And they did look better. They looked better. Yeah.
Memories. I think I had
Showtime?
one
what was
friend.
The name? Brian, what was the name of that?
Betamax.
Brian, what was the name of that video store? Please remind me and share in the Instagram
get
or
us
something.
on X.
Brian. Okay.
Question number 2.
Yes.
In which of Brian De Palma's films did he direct Bruce Willis?
Is it a small part?
Nope.
Wait a minute.
It's not the lead. It's the third lead.
Is it before or after this?
There's a clue available.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed, but I need the clue.
It's not the most obvious. The clue is we're calling Al Powell, phoning a friend.
Hey, pal. Hey, Al.
this notorious flop was released in 1990 and also starred Tom Hanks and Melanie
Oh
Griffith.
my God. I just watched this movie, The Bonfire of the Vanities, because
Correct.
my friends at TCM, Turner Classic Movies Podcast, did a great series about that film, Bonfire of the Vanities. And it's totally worth it.
Did you enjoy the
Yeah, I had a great time. I think
the rewatch?
yeah, and De Palma it's De Palma. Like, there's always something to recommend it. You
I
know?
remember watching it as a kid and not really understanding like much about, this was a big Tom Wolfe book and everyone was so upset by
Well, it was a little outside of
adaptation
our league.
I mean, I was
then.
pretty young.
It has
but
an amazing
I remember
opening
really
shot.
liking it.
Yeah, I think it's a really
Actually.
entertaining movie with some like questionable 1990s politics, but it's a good movie.
Question number 3. This is the humdinger of the group.
Ooh.
Emilio Estevez makes an uncredited cameo in Mission Impossible as IMF agent Jack Harmon. But in which Emilio Estevez movie does Tom Cruise make an uncredited appearance?
Clue, please.
This was wild to me. Clue is, this popular Western was released in 1988 and had a sequel in 1990.
Yeah, it's Young Guns.
So,
Is he the horse?
It's almost...
Is he the guy running in the background?
It's almost Mission Impossible level. Like, so I believe the story is, and some of this might be apocryphal, but I watched the sequence to try and make sense of it.
I like Young Guns, just wanted to say.
There's a sequence at the end of Young Guns where they're all held up in like a house.
And he gets thrown out in the chest and he pops
And there's
out.
a big shoot. They're surrounded.
Yeah, I've seen it 40
and Tom
times.
Cruise in heavy makeup and disguise, I think, just showed up on the set to probably visit Emilio because they're bros.
Yeah.
And they were like, "What do you want to be like in this scene?"
Oh
It was
my
almost like
God.
as an extra. So you can kind of see it very briefly. He's one of the guys that gets shot outside that shack or whatever. But he's in like heavy, like those sort of beard from that era. It was like Gettysburg level kind of like beard.
Yeah.
work,
You know? Wow.
So
It feels
you
hearing.
could barely see him.
It also just feels like hearing that
But he is
stories.
there.
Like Hollywood used to be a much smaller town where Tom Cruise would just be like, "Yeah, I'll do 5 minutes on
There's
this."
a famous story that, as I recall, from my favorite horror movie of all time, Near Dark, that I think James
good
Cameron drove the truck that runs over Bill Paxton.
That's great. That
on the
rules.
day because he was
just there.
involved with Catherine.
Yeah.
Bigelow,
That's right. That's right.
Or something like that. Or they were. I don't know if they were romantically involved or not at that stage. In any case,
Young
that
Guns.
about does it.
Well, I have one. No, I have.
You have one for me.
Marcel Ayers, who plays Alexander Golitsyn in this
Okay.
movie, has a major role in another 90s post-end of history action thriller from the year 1997. Can you name that film?
What is The Peacemaker?
Yes, it is The Peacemaker. He plays the main bad guy in that movie. It's so cool that he shows up just casually as like the bad guy in both of these movies. I'm a huge
You're
Peacemaker.
a Peacemaker head.
I'm a peace
way back.
head. I'm a peace head.
Peace, man.
I'm
Peace.
I love that movie from way back. I'm old school. I just love DreamWorks, you know?
Was that their
First movie.
First movie?
Mimi Letter, underrated director.
Absolutely. Well, that about does her.
That about
for,
does her. That about
we were living in a democracy.
The last time I checked.
That is our show for today. Please smash that subscribe button.
Smash it.
Whatever that
like
means.
Press the red light and the green light
Touch
together.
it gently.
Yeah.
But seriously, write a nice review.
If you're not already
or something.
If you're not stop talking. If you're not already subscribed to the podcast Cows in the Field, the episode won't be out yet, but we will be on that show soon discussing, speaking of prohibition, Michael Mann's 2009 masterpiece, Public Enemies. Very excited.
coming up.
I have a big theory about that movie that I'm excited.
We're recording that imminently, but the episode won't be out for a little while.
Great
But It's
movie.
a great podcast to be involved with
Stephen Graham
regardless.
in that movie. Yeah, great podcast.
Any other plugs? Things, thoughts, moans, groans, worries, concerns?
We're on X. We're on whatever the Instagram, Twitter thing is now. Not Blue Sky, but whatever. Threads. I started a Threads account for the show, so you can find us on Die Hard OAB on Threads. I don't post much there, but you can find us there. We're all on X. Phil, I noticed there was a new Cybertruck in the front.
Right.
Yeah, what's going on there?
The other one had a couple of little issues, so they've given
It murdered a guy in a board meeting, as I understand. Yeah, the
What?
RoboCop joke.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Mr. Kenny, you come up here and demonstrate?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let us know when it's fixed. Let us know when the first one's fixed.
Should be should be able to comply in about 20 seconds.
Oh, no. Well, I will edit that out of the show. Sometimes Phil loses it.
Sometimes I lose it. More
Liam G.
often than not.
Billingham on X. Phil is. I don't know where to go from here. I feel very very lost. But next time on the show,
Yes.
I'll take pleasure in gutting you, boy.
I'll
take pleasure in gutting you, boy. What film are we doing?
We are doing The Rock.
Holy-
Welcome to The Rock.
Holy.
Can you believe it?
shit.
And we have an incredible guest, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well,
Don't jinx
secret
it.
special
See, Ben,
guest.
I'll give you a little. It's been on the show before, but we're bringing him back. You know, when we started this podcast, we became mercenaries, and mercenaries get paid.
I want my
fucking
money!
downloads. See you next time when I've run out of steam on that one. I think that's all I got. Don't come to San Francisco. Die Hard on a Blank is a podcast created and hosted by Philip Gawthorne. Liam Billingham co-hosts and produces the show. Mike Mayer and Michael Sugar are the executive producers. Find us on Twitter and Instagram at DieHardOAB. Rate, review, follow the show wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, tell your movie podcast-loving friends about Die Hard on a Blank. See you next time on Die Hard on a Blank.
Back to school savings are officially in session at Tanger Outlets. Shop tax-free August 2nd through 6th and save up to 70% off the latest school styles. The best of apparel, footwear, accessories, and more. Save at Nike Factory Store, American Eagle, Gap Outlet, Crocs, Under Armour, Banana Republic Factory, and hundreds more. There's always something happening. Discover the latest fun and events all season long. Tanger Outlets, your savings destination.